So good afternoon, sir. I think we are live now. So with the permission of director, shall I start the proceeding?
Please go.
Good afternoon and warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, our director, scientists, researchers, students, and all joining us for the today's online program. I am Dr. Avinash Kumar from National Center for Polar and Ocean Research, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of us for the today's World Ocean Day Lecture 2026. Every year on the 8th June, we celebrate the World Ocean Day to recognize the importance of ocean in our daily lives. Although many of us may not think about it every day, but the ocean influences almost everything around us, from the air we breathe and the climate we experience, to the food we eat and the livelihoods of the millions of the people. As we know that the ocean covers more than 70% of the Earth's surface and plays an important role in regulating the Earth climate, absorbing the heat and the carbon dioxide. At the same time, it is facing a growing challenges from the climate change, pollution, and many other human activities. The day also reminds us for our collective responsibilities to protect the sustainability, manage the invaluable marine resources and the future generation. To help us understand these challenges, we are privileged to have with us one of the India's distinguished ocean scientists, Professor Dr. V.S.S. Sharma. He is a scientist G, National Institute of Oceanography, Regional Center, Vishakhapatnam. Once again, I would like to warmly welcome all those who are joining us for today's live webcast from the YouTube channel of NCPOR. We are happy to have the participants from the different institutions, universities across the India joining for today's event. Before we proceed for today's World Ocean Day lecture, it is my privilege to invite our director, Dr. Tamban Melot, to deliver a message on behalf of NCPOR on the occasion of World Ocean Day. Dr. Tamban Melot is a globally renowned geologist and glaciologist who is pioneering research has significantly advanced our understanding on the polar climate system and their response to the climate change. Under his visionary leadership, NCPOR has further strengthened its position as a premier institute in polar and ocean sciences, expanding our extent to the international collaboration and enhancing India's contribution to the global and polar ocean research. So may I request Dr. Tamban Melot, Director NCPOR, to kindly share his thought on the significance of the World Ocean Day.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Avinash. And once again, welcome to the entire audience of on this World Ocean Day at our YouTube channel, as well as also a very warm welcome from NCPOR, the India's gateway to the polar regions. I'm grateful to that Dr. V.S. Sharma has agreed to give today's lecture. As a veteran oceanographer with an umpteen number of experience in the ocean, as well as exceptional high standard science in the areas of marine biogeochemistry, it's our privilege. Good afternoon to every one of you. On this version, World Ocean Day, I basically would like to speak about I would say, three interconnected dimensions of our planet's future. The ocean, the blue economy, as well as the polar regions. How do they play a significant role in our life, as well as maybe how they are interconnected? To me, together they form just not an environmental system, but also an economic foundation and a climate regulator of our humanity. So therefore, NCPOR really take pride in the fact that we undertake frontline research in these core areas that will define the future of mankind. As everyone knows that oceans are the dominant and the most important feature on our planet. It's of course even described as oceans in the Earth's life support system itself, and rightly so. It regulates not only the temperature, the weather systems, but also sustains extraordinary diversity of life. And the oceans also absorb majority of excess heat generated by the greenhouse gas emissions, offering us from the even more extreme warming on land. Of course, it plays a crucial role in the carbon cycle itself, being the largest carbon sink of the planet. At the same time, most importantly, the marine ecosystems produce nearly half of the ocean, the oxygen what we breathe. In fact, a real sense, I would say that ocean cannot separate from us. It's a part of our survey system itself. So it's also most important that ocean being not only just survival system, but also it provides food for us. So thus comes the how do we look after the ocean for when we look forwards to the resource itself. That's where it comes the India's blue economy vision itself, which aims to essentially sustainable utilization of blue economy resources for the economic growth of the country, especially to ensuring health, safety, as well as diversity of the ocean ecosystem itself. So that we have a very significant, nearly double our the GDP from the ocean by the 2047, when we expect to have a Vikasit Bharat. So to me, the blue economy itself represents a paradigm shift in how do we think about our ocean's resources. It is not just about exploiting the ocean indefinitely. It's more importantly about using the resources in a sustainable, inclusive, as well as even more of a climate friendly or resilient manner. What it also makes powerful is its integration of economic growth with environment stewardship. That's what it makes a big difference between how when we look at only for resources and when we look at the blue economy. For countries like India, for example, I would say with such a long coastline, with a very large exclusive economic zone, as well as potential extended continental shelf, it makes quite a huge importance to have a very strategic interest in the blue economy, because it will, because we can, but the most important part, I would say, to really use the resources in a very proper manner, you need to understand the ocean in a better way. As everyone says, that we cannot manage what we cannot understand. So understanding is the key. So this is where the ocean science, the monitoring systems, and international collaboration all becomes essential. That's where typically what NCPOR normally does it. So the polar region itself, which is including this Antarctica and Arctic, we all know that they play a very critical role in ocean circulation, which we call as the global conveyor belt system. But also they control the global weather patterns, especially the extreme weather patterns, even the major climate system like monsoons, and most importantly, the ever increasing sea level. So processes such as the global deep water formation, which distribute heat and nutrients across the planet, all this actually are controlled by the between the poles and the oceans. So any disruption of this system can alter the entire global system. So most importantly, the polar regions also are important among the most sensitive indicators of the climate change. Therefore, because they respond much faster than other parts of the Earth system, making them really the sentinels of the global environment systems. So to me, what connects the ocean and the polar regions is a single underlying truth. They are part of an integrated Earth system. Ocean currents transport, of course, the heat from the tropics to the poles. The poles, the polar ice sheet, what melting influences the ocean salinity and circulation, and changes in the ocean temperature also affects fisheries and economies. So in other words, essentially, I would say that environmental systems and economic systems are deeply intertwined. This is what we have to keep in mind. And this interconnectedness also would mean that we have to be more responsible, because a warming ocean affects fisheries, our food security. A destabilizing polar system accelerates sea level rise, as well as ecosystems. A weakened marine ecosystem undermines blue economy. So these are not separate challenges. They are basically our shared challenge expressed in different ways. Therefore, we need to basically better understand the oceans, the linkage to the poles, for managing our environment and resources, especially of that of the ocean. So a varied kind of observations, whether it's satellite or autonomous underwater vehicles or the deep sea sensors or polar research stations or the marine oceanography platforms, all of them are important for continuous insight into the region, which are, which once become, which were originally inaccessible and have become more and more accessible. So these tools are essentially will, in fact, control the way we understand the ocean. So therefore, one thing which I would also say that equally important is the spirit of the cooperation. Not only at the national level, but most importantly also international level. That defines the ocean and polar research, because these regions are governed by the science-driven questions, which are reflecting a rare global consensus that require for knowledge and stewardship. So therefore, it need to transcend the boundaries. So therefore, our future prosperity will not be determined just only by land, but the oceans we depend on, the polar regions that silently govern our balance. So with that background, I'm very confident that the next lecture will give you a very good overview as well as a good insight into how do the oceans work in controlling our climate system, especially through its interaction with the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Thank you so much. Welcome to this meeting.
Avinash, you are muted.
Thank you so much sir, for your insightful address and inspiring message, which really you have highlighted that how the blue economy will be going to be major role in our, even not only for the scientific, it is the country growth also, and well connected that how the ocean and polar regions are interconnected. And this is the occasion of the World Ocean Day. So we sincerely appreciate your guidance and leadership, and which has been taken in NCPOR in a different endeavors, and we are enhancing our research in a different level. So now it is my great honor and privilege to introduce our distinguished speaker for the today's, Professor Dr. V.S.S. Sharma. Professor Sharma is one of the India's leading scientists in the ocean, which is internationally acclaimed with the expert in the marine biogeochemistry, ocean carbon cycling, ocean atmosphere interaction, and climate change. He is currently serving as a scientist G and scientist in charge at the CSIR-NIO Regional Center of Vishakhapatnam. He is also a professor at the Academy of Scientific and Innovative Research, ACSIR. Over the last 3 decades, Sir has made pioneer contributions to understand the Indian ocean role in a global carbon cycle, greenhouse gas dynamics, coastal ecosystem processes, and impact of climate change on marine environments. His outstanding scientific achievement has recognized through the several prestigious honors, including the National Geoscience Award in 2020-25, National Award on Excellence in Ocean Science and Technology by Ministry of Earth Sciences, and numerous international distinctions. He is a fellow of all 3 prestigious Indian Science Academies. Professor Sharma has published more than 260 research papers in peer-reviewed international and national journals, have been received more than 10,000 citations worldwide. He has also played a key role and the leadership in international scientific program, including serving as chair of UNESCO Ocean Carbon CO2 Observation Network for the Indian Ocean and a chair of IPCC Model Evaluation Committee for Indian Ocean. He has a mentor more than 20 doctoral scholars and continue to inspire the next generation for the ocean scientists. Today, on the occasion of World Ocean Day, Professor Sharma will deliver a talk on ocean acidification in Indian Ocean, a topic of immense relevance in increasing the atmospheric carbon dioxide and anthropogenic activities that continue to alter the chemistry of our ocean, with the far-reaching implications of the marine ecosystem, climate regulations, and human as well-being. I hope that lecture will provide the valuable insight into the changing state of the Indian Ocean and the scientific challenges and that opportunities lies ahead. So let's extend, so now I'll extend a warm welcome to Professor Dr. V.S.S. Sharma for his talk, and I'll invite sir for your valuable talk for today.
Thank you, Dr. Avinash and Dr. Tamban, for inviting me for this lecture. I'm really honored for this. Um, Dr. Tamban already made a base to say about how the oceans are helping the people and also the life of our existence on the Earth's surface. Okay. I hope my slides are visible, Dr. Avinash.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I wish all of you the World Ocean Day 2026. As you know that there is no ocean and there is no life actually on the earth. As of now, we know that the oceans are existing only on the planet Earth, not in other planets. So that is why we believe that the life is existing in this planet. That is the reason this year's the theme was given as reimagine beyond the world we know and a new relationship with our ocean. So what kind of how the relationship we have with the ocean and how we can able to reimagine them so that make it a better relationship with the ocean and with the human being. If you see, the oceans actually are producing about 50% of the planet's oxygen. And it is the home to the most of the Earth's biodiversity. Actually, what we know from the ocean's biodiversity is much smaller than what is really existing there. It is the main source for the protein to the billions of people on the Earth. And the oceans are actually playing a key role on the economy, as Dr. Thamman was already mentioned about the blue economy and the energy that is coming from the ocean. And with an estimated 40 million people are being employed due to the ocean-based industries by 2030. Despite we know that this kind of benefits we are actually getting from the ocean, but we also see that about 90% of the big fish population seems to be depleting. 50% of the coral reefs are being destroyed and heavily polluted and altering the ocean's acidity. So that is also changing a lot of life in the ocean. So we are actually taking more from the ocean than it can able to replenish. So we need to understand where we need to protect, what way we need to protect, so that the sustainable resources we can able to achieve from the oceans. So with this relevance, I would like to speak about the ocean acidification in the Indian Ocean, what way it is affecting the life in the ocean, what kind of fallacies we have on the ocean acidification, and what kind of projections we have with reference to the modeling on the issues relevant to that. We all know about the global warming. We say that the polar ice are being decreasing due to the warming of the atmosphere. We also see that the forest fires are increasing, the floods are increasing, and because of the emissions coming from the industries or other human activities, mainly from the carbon dioxide. Even though other greenhouse gases like a methane and the nitrous oxide, and they are also influenced to some extent, but the concentration of the carbon dioxide is much higher than that of the other gases. Main source is coming from the vehicular emissions and the industrial emissions. Is actually they are increasing the atmospheric CO2 levels to the large extent. If you look at the long-term trends of the carbon dioxide, This is actually at the Mauna Loa in the Hawaii Islands, where the human impact is relatively lower. That will give you the mean impact you see in the atmosphere. And way back in the early 1980s, this was somewhere close to the 340 ppm. But at present, the today's CO2 concentration is 434 ppm. So you could see within the period of these few decades, the atmospheric CO2 increased significantly in the atmosphere because of these anthropogenical increase of the activities. Whatever we are releasing the CO2 into the atmosphere due to the fossil fuel burning or otherwise biomass burning, not all is actually remaining in the atmosphere. About 26% of this CO2 released into the atmosphere is absorbed by the oceans. About 29% is absorbed in the biomass on the land surface, and the remaining about 45 to 50% of the CO2 is accumulated in the atmosphere. In the absence of these two spheres, the atmospheric CO2 would be much higher than, and the warming will be much higher than what you see now. Now the oceans are also, even though they are absorbing about the 26% of the anthropogenic CO2, not everywhere oceans are absorbing. Like you see in this plot, where you see light green to the yellow and the red color regions, like the Western Arabian Sea, Eastern Equatorial Pacific, and the Equatorial Atlantic. These are the few regions where ocean is releasing CO2 into the atmosphere, whereas the blue regions or the purple regions, that is where the more CO2 is being absorbed from the ocean, from the atmosphere into the ocean. Mainly you see the polar regions or the subpolar regions, that is where more CO2 is being removed from the atmosphere into the ocean. In the tropical regions, the CO2 is released into the atmosphere. How do we know that what we are releasing into the ocean atmosphere is not remaining in the ocean, in the atmosphere? Something is being removed. You see here this plot, the red colored line here, that is what the fossil fuel burning related CO2 released into the atmosphere. So this much of the CO2 per year we released into the atmosphere. But what is there in the atmosphere is the green line. It is less than what we released. This difference is removed either by the ocean or partly by the ocean and partly by the land biosphere. You see, even this removal is not constant. Sometimes you see that the difference is very high, sometimes the difference is very small, sometimes maybe positive also. It is because of the ocean mixing changes with reference to the El Nino or the southern oscillations. The ocean mixing is variable, and therefore the amount of the CO2 is absorbed by the ocean is also variable. The ocean is not constantly removing the CO2 from the atmosphere. It's depending on how the ocean mixing, upper ocean mixing is taking place. That determines how much of the CO2 can be taken up from the atmosphere into the ocean. How does this CO2 is going into the ocean? Unlike other gases like nitrous oxide and the methane, carbon dioxide actually reacts with the oceanic waters. Like a CO2 is reacting with the water and forms the carbonic acid, which is very unstable form. It immediately dissociates into the proton and bicarbonate and again into the proton and carbonate. So this is the way the CO2 is entering into the ocean and remains as either carbonic acid or the bicarbonate or the carbonate form. Among these forms, which one is the dominant is actually controlled by the pH of the seawater. This plot we call it as the Jerome plot. The x-axis is the pH, the y-axis percentage of these three forms. Either the CO2 in the aqueous form in the dissolved and the bicarbonate or the carbonate. As we all know that the seawater pH is about 8. At 8 pH, you see here the maximum is in the bicarbonate and the small fraction about the 20% will be in the carbonate form. Very small fraction about 1% will be in the CO2 form. Make a note here, if you decrease the pH, so bicarbonate form decreases, CO2 form increases and the carbonate form decreases. If we increase the pH of the ocean, carbonate form increases, bicarbonate decreases, CO2 form decreases. So that if you change the pH of the ocean, the form of the inorganic carbon dissolved in the ocean that decreases, that has a significant impact on the ocean biology. Now, the CO2 is increasing in the atmosphere. Is it the one which is happening now only? Is it because of the humans have evolved now? That is why the industrial activity started and giving this, and why we need to worry so much on that. From the polar regions, the ice cores have been taken, and the amount of the gas trapped in the ice cores and the dating of them, we can able to understand what kind of CO2 concentrations were there in the past. So like that, if you see way back into the 800,000 years back to the present, it has been constructed. The similar work is also being done at the NCPOR from the Indian sector of the Antarctica region by measuring the CO2 concentrations in the ice cores. What we have seen here, in the past 800,000 years, we never see the CO2 concentration increased more than 300 ppm in the past 800,000 years. But what we see today is 434 ppm. That means the Earth never experienced such a high concentration of the CO2 in the past 800,000 years. That is being experienced in the past few decades. That is actually alarming us. What kind of implication this will have on the Earth's climate? Now, as you see, once CO2 dissolves in the ocean, what is happening here is that it is actually releasing the protons. You see here, when the carbonic acid to bicarbonate or bicarbonate to the carbonate, protons are being released. If protons releases, the pH decreases because pH is a minus log of the proton. That is why pH is decreasing. Now you see, the red color one is the atmospheric CO2 is increasing in the Hawaii Ocean Time Series station. Similarly, the oceanic CO2 is also increasing. The amount of the CO2 dissolved in the ocean is also increasing in the similar way. At the same time, the pH is decreasing. You see, between 1988 to the present, the pH is decreasing from about 8.12 to 8.05. So, on average, if you take, the pH is decreasing at the rate of 0.002 per year. The similar kind of trends have been seen in the different basins of the global ocean. Like in the Greenland here, immigrant sea, bats, bear, that is the Bermuda Atlantic time series in the North Atlantic, Astock, that is in the Pacific, Hawaii Ocean time series in the Pacific, North Pacific, Carioca Bay and Munida Sea. These places, they have seen that the rate of decrease of the pH, but at variable rates. It's varying between 0.00132 to 0.0026 per year. this much of the pH is decreasing. If you look at the same in the Bay of Bengal, because that is where we have at least 2 decades of the time series pH available, what we have seen, it is decreasing at the rate of 0.013. You look at here, this is the 0.0013, 0.013 to 0.016 during the different seasons. That means 10 times more than that of the pH that is decreasing elsewhere in the globe in the same latitudinal belt. That is what is happening in the northern Indian Ocean. Why it is so much is acidifying in the northern Indian Ocean? You know that 30% of the global population actually dwelling along the Indian Ocean coast. You look at the aerosol optical depth from the satellite, you see the red color over the India and also South China Sea. So this is the way more amount of the pollutants are being released, mainly in the Indo-Gangetic plain. If you see their content, the chemical composition of the water-soluble chemicals of the aerosols, about 60% is by the sulfates in both Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea, and followed by you have the nitrates and ammonium and so on. So there is a higher amount of the sulfates and the nitrates, they'll give the acidity to the aerosols. Now you look at the aerosol water-soluble ionic composition, the total anions versus the total cations, they are not balanced. You see the slope is never been 1. So that means there is a dominant anions compared to the cations. So they are not being getting neutralized. So therefore more dominant acidic components we have in the aerosols throughout the year. When you dissolve these aerosols in the coastal waters, seawater, like if 1 microgram per cubic meter of the aerosol collected in the air, 1 cubic meter of the air, dissolve in the 100 ml of the seawater, about 0.02 to the about 0.1 of the pH is decreasing. Again, there is a seasonality. You see during the winter time or the postmonsoon to the winter time, the decrease of the pH is more compared to that in the spring or the summer time. It is depending on the source of the aerosol entering into this region. Therefore, 1 microgram of the aerosol from the 1 cubic meter of the air could able to decrease the pH by 0.022 in 100 ml of the water in winter, 0.011 in the summer, 0.007 in the spring, in the case of Bay of Bengal. Therefore, the atmospheric pollutants deposition, in addition to the CO2 increase in the atmosphere, is decreasing the ocean pH. So the pH is decreasing. So it has a severe impact on the ocean biology. First, let us see what way ocean biology is going to be changed due to decrease of the pH. You know that plankton, phytoplankton, or the plants on the land, they actually fix atmospheric CO2 and then convert that as a food by converting that into the glucose to prepare the food for them. This inorganic carbon assimilation actually is normally catalyzed by this plankton using the enzyme called Rubisco. This Rubisco enzyme issue is that it has a low affinity for the CO2. Unless you have the more concentration of the CO2, it cannot able to fix the carbon dioxide. But as I said, at seawater pH, the CO2 in the inorganic carbon in the form of the CO2, it has only 1%. The majority is a bicarbonate and a small amount of the carbonate it is existing. See, if the CO2 is more, If the CO2 form is more, they can able to fix more amount of the carbon dioxide. Otherwise, what it does, it actually takes the bicarbonate into the cell, convert that into the CO2 in the cell using the carbonic anhydrase enzyme, and so that the carbon dioxide is accumulated in the cell, and then it can able to start fixing the carbon dioxide. This process is called carbon concentration mechanism, in short CCM. So it is taking the bicarbonate, which is plenty available, and converting into the CO2 and fix the carbon dioxide. This process is an energy consuming process. It can able to do it, but requires to use energy. On the other hand, if we have the more CO2 in the water, mainly it happens in the polar regions, in certain zones where the mixing is taking place, then the passive diffusion of the CO2 can occur through the cell membrane. You have the more CO2 in the water, the CO2 can be diffused inside, and once enough is accumulated in the cell wall, inside the cell, they can able to fix the carbon dioxide. Here, they need not go for energy consuming CCM mechanism. So they can able to save the energy, they can able to produce energy by using the CO2. So this is the way, if we increase the CO2 concentrations, so they can able to stop the CCM mechanism, can able to fix the carbon dioxide. Now we look at two types of the plankton. One is the cyanobacteria, which is the photosynthetically can able to do it, the photosynthesis cyanobacteria. Other one are the most abundant diatoms. Normally the cyanobacteria, they will actually pick up bicarbonate, they will uptake, and then they can able to convert that into the CO2 using the CCM mechanism and start fixing the carbon dioxide. In the case of the diatoms, they can use the passive diffusion of the CO2 because the cell membrane is highly permeable for the CO2 to diffuse through the cell membrane. In the case of the cyanobacteria, it is not that possible. So therefore, if more CO2 is being there in the water, the diatoms can be more benefited. So if the surrounding waters are high, and the diatoms actually will stop the CCM mechanism and try to take more CO2 and can able to produce more amount of the organic matter through the photosynthesis. How do you know this is happening? These things can be measured using the mesocosm experiments containing large volume of the water. They look mesocosm tanks like this, try to manipulate the CO2 concentrations in the waters by changing the pH. If you decrease the more and more pH, more and more CO2 will be formed according to the Jerome's, the plot as you have seen. If you go pH decrease it, the more inorganic carbon remains in the form of CO2. Such kind of experiments have been done mostly in the coastal waters. And they found that because of the enrichment of the CO2, marine planktons are being benefited by increase in the productivity, by increase of the growth of the diatoms, by increase of the primary production, and so on. Most of these experiments were done in the coastal waters where nutrients are quite rich. As you know that in the coastal water, either due to the mixing like an upwelling, or maybe the anthropogenic nutrients, or maybe because of the river discharge. So many sources, nutrients would be there. So that is where the increase of the CO2 are getting benefited by the diatoms. It's not alone stops with the diatoms. The cascading effect will be there in the food web, because the diatoms increase, those which are feeding on the diatoms would decrease, and so on into the other organisms in the food. But in the open ocean, the conducting this kind of experiment is quite difficult sometimes, but we can use the isotopic tools to understand how sensitive they are and what kind of mechanism of the carbon fixing is taking place in the open ocean regions using the carbon isotopes. As you know that the carbon has two stable isotopes. One is a 12, which is the most abundant, and the second one is the 13, which is the less abundant. Now, if the CO2 diffusion is the dominant one in the waters by the phytoplankton, what you will observe that the delta 13C of the particulate organic matter, which is nothing but the phytoplankton, versus CO2 concentration, if you draw, you will get a negative relationship. Because if more and more CO2 is there, the lighter CO2 is being taken up, and therefore the POM become lighter and lighter. So you will get the negative relationship. So there is the isotopic fractionation. This is called the Rubisco can able to do up to the 25 to 28 per mil. So the concentration of CO2 is found more. The fractionation, the photosynthetic fractionation, we can able to identify and showing the negative relationship. You see, you take the CO2 concentration and the epsilon value from the polar regions into the tropical regions. You see here on the top, the around 60 to 70 degrees south, on average 67 I'm showing here. That is where it is showing the negative relationship with epsilon versus CO2 concentration here. That means in this region, higher latitudes where CO2 diffusion is more dominant. When you come to the south, the subtropical to the tropical regions, where this is becoming flat, such a relationship is not showing. That means the CO2 diffusion may not be dominant here. More carbon concentration mechanism seems to be the potential mechanism of assimilating CO2 in the lower latitudes. We try to see this using the data collected during the geotraces cruises that we could able to cover between 30 degrees south to the 30 degree north during the different seasons. Based on this data, what we could notice here is that we have the lighter isotopic value in the eastern Indian Ocean because we have the lower salinity coming from the Ganges Brahmaputra regions, and compared to the heavier isotopes in the western Indian Ocean. And the depleted delta 13 DAC you will see in the eastern versus heavier in the western side. And the enrichment of the Arabian Sea is mainly caused by the upwelling. The subsurface waters are coming to the surface where more POC is being formed with enriched carbon and nitrogen isotopic values. So when you draw epsilon versus the CO2 in the Indian Ocean, what you could see, we have anomalously the higher epsilon here because of the riverine influence on them. Otherwise, we don't see any strong the negative relationship what is being observed here, because here the concentration of the CO2 varied between 8 to 18, but the isotopic the epsilon value is almost 1 to 2 per mil. That suggests that the dominant phytoplankton uptake is not CO2 diffusion but by the bicarbonate. The reason here is that most of the Indian Ocean, the tropical Indian Ocean, except during seasonal in the Arabian Sea, mostly nutrients are very poor in this region. That is why the cyanobacteria is the most dominant phytoplankton in the tropical Indian Ocean. The cyanobacteria mostly they uptake the bicarbonate as I explained before. So that is why we don't identify any negative relations with the epsilon and the CO2 concentration here. That clearly suggests that CO2 diffusion mechanism may not be dominant in the tropical Indian Ocean. So what is the impact in the Indian Ocean, in the tropical Indian Ocean of increased CO2 on the phytoplankton? as I told, that in the tropical region, the dominant one, the bicarbonate is the uptake in the dominant one because of the existence of the cyanobacteria, where oligotropy is prevailed because the nutrients are very poor there. So that is why smaller phytoplankton like a cyanobacteria is growing there. They are uptaking the bicarbonate. Even if we change the CO2, it may not have a significant effect on them. So therefore, in the tropical regions, the acidification may not have a severe impact on the phytoplankton groups. Though in the Arabian Sea, you have a seasonally enrichment of the nutrients occurs where the diatoms are the dominant. That is where the CO2 impact or the acidification impact will be higher, but not in the other parts of the Indian Ocean. So the hypothesis here is that due to lack of nutrients, mainly the N and P, the changes in the CO2 levels may not influence the uptake as the nutrients are essential for the fiber production. Because if they have the more CO2 outside, to take, they can able to diffuse inside, but to fix the carbon dioxide, they require nutrients, N and P. If there are no N and P, even though you have the more CO2 outside, but phytoplankton may not able to uptake. That is why in the oligotrophic regions, the ocean acidification effect is actually suppressed by the nutrient depletion. To see this, we conducted an experiment here in the Bay of Bengal in the offshore region, so about 200 kilometers away from the coast. Mainly you see the phosphate concentration. The phosphate concentration is varied from between 0.01 to almost 0.1 micromolar. Except S2 and S5 where we have the more than 0.05 micromolar of the phosphate, relatively higher concentration. Remaining places, phosphate is severely limiting phytoplankton production. Where we decreased the pH by adding the CO2 into the waters in the mesocosm experiments. We try to see what is the response of the phytoplankton. What we could see that only the S2 and the S5 where the N of phosphate is there, that is where the significant response of the phytoplankton we could able to see that. In the remaining places, the changes are insignificant statistically. That clearly suggests that the phytoplankton, they respond to the ocean acidification where enough nutrients are available. If nutrients are controlling, there won't be any response to the ocean acidification. So we also found that there is a linear correlation between the response of the phytoplankton to the phosphate concentration available in the water column. So that clearly shows that everywhere if you decrease the pH, it may not influence phytoplankton composition or their activities or their biomass in the tropical region. So that means that the limiting nutrient levels dominate the ocean acidification impact on the phytoplankton. So due to the existence of the oligotropy in the tropical region, the ocean acidification impact on the soft tissue phytoplankton biomass or the composition or the primary production may be insignificant. The CO2 diffusion may be occurring with the dominant bicarbonate actually uptake mainly in the tropical Indian Ocean. Therefore, the soft tissue organisms in the open ocean regions of the tropical Indian Ocean may not be significantly impacted by the ocean acidification. But we need to conduct more experiments in the open ocean regions in this in the tropical Indian Ocean where the nutrients are very low under detection limits to reconfirm that the impact in the phytoplankton are much negligible with reference to the statistic. But that is not the case if you look at the hard tissue organisms. For example, coral reefs. Coral reefs, here the biologically calcium carbonate is being precipitated there. You know that coral reef ecosystems are very, very important. 30% of the marine fish species actually is being supported in this region. And they provide lots of medicines or the chemicals which are important for the pharmaceutical industry, which can actually coming from the coral reef regions. In the coral reef regions, the corals actually they will be in a relationship with the plankton, mainly the zooxanthellae. Because of them only, they get a very beautiful colors for the corals. So they have a relationship because the phytoplankton requires a shelter and the food that is produced by them is being taken up by the corals. So such kind of relationship they are there. And they can able to secrete calcium and the carbonate and they combine them and secrete actually calcium carbonate and they start growing there. Normally, if the corals are experiencing any kind of the stress, they will actually expel the zooxanthellae from their cell. So then they look very white in color, they lose the color, so they look like they are bleached. And sometimes when the organism actually not experiencing so much stress, they can able to re-recruit them and then start doing the calcium carbonate skeletons. What are the stressors here? Mainly the temperature is the major stressor. From the average summer temperature to that of, if 1 or 2 degrees centigrade temperature increases from that, that will be a big stressor and they started bleaching the corals. Increased CO2 levels and the decrease in the carbonate availability, pollution, overfishing, all these can able to stress the corals, leading to the bleaching of the corals. For your information, using this temperature, the Indian National Center for Coastal, the Ocean Information Services in Hyderabad, they are actually forecasting the coral bleaching using the temperature changes. Now, the green regions in the tropical where significant impact of the coral bleaching has been already recorded. So this has a significant impact on the tourism, fisheries sector, ecosystem, and kind of the new metabolite what we are supposed to get, we may not able to get it if they die. Not only corals, even this kind of a calcium carbonate secreting organisms like a molluscus, like a bivalves, oysters, clams, snails, like a sea urchins, sea stars, even the coccolithophores, smaller organisms like coccolithophores, pteropods, foraminifera, all these organisms can able to affected by the decrease of the pH or the ocean acidification. The reason is that they actually fix calcium and carbonate into the calcium carbonate for their shells. If the carbonate availability is low, they could not able to prepare these shells. As I told you, if pH is decreasing here, the carbonate concentration decreases. So therefore, not enough carbonate is available for them to fix calcium carbonate, resulting in less amount of the skeletal material is formed and those species are in danger due to ocean acidification. There is another danger by increasing the CO2 is that whatever the calcium carbonate is produced by the organisms, they may be dissolved much faster than they are. Normally, the skeletal material are produced in the upper ocean where the light is available. Once they die, they start sinking into the deeper ocean. At one depth, these shells actually gets started dissolving. That we call the saturation depth. So this calcium carbonate forms into two different forms. One is the aragonite form, other one is the calcite form. Mainly this aragonite form is very sensitive to the pH. So once it is dissolved, once it is sinking, if the CO2 concentrations are more in the water, so the CO2 reacts with the calcium carbonate and dissolve them and forms as a bicarbonate and a calcium ion. As a result of this, alkalinity actually increases in the zone where the saturation depth is there. Who can find the evidences of these using the data collected way back in the geoscience period in the 1970s to the present? You see in the 1970s, the aragonite saturation depth in the Indian Ocean is somewhere here at the 500-meter depth. That has been shallowed in the 2000 by 400-meter depth. Similarly in the Pacific. So because of the increase of the CO2 levels in the ocean, they started dissolving the skeletal material in the deeper layers. If you look at in the Indian Ocean, mainly this is the data is available since the last several decades. What we found was that in the Bay of Bengal, the aragonite saturation is shallowing at the rate of 8.6 meters per year. In case of the Arabian Sea, it is shallowing at the rate of 5.3 meters per day because of decrease of the pH in these basins. If business as usual scenario occurs, the aragonite saturation depth may be surfaced in the Bay of Bengal by 2050, which is not very far from now, and by end of this century in the Arabian Sea. So that means carbonate secreting organisms, including corals, no longer can able to survive in these waters because of the faster decrease of the pH. Now, either IPCC or we are depending on the models, the either coupled models or the ocean biogeochemical models. If you look at the IPCC models, you see here, this is the warming trend, this is the pH changes in the future. You see in the Indian Ocean, they don't see any differences in the pH change in the entire Indian Ocean. Whereas the observations are saying that the northern Indian Ocean is actually pH is decreasing much faster than the other basins or the other part of the Indian Ocean. It is because most of these models, the aerosol chemistry is not part of it. It is not to blame the numerical modelers because such data is not available even to incorporate into the models. Fortunately, the lot of data has been collected in the past few decades using their relationship with the anthropogenic aerosol optical depth that is measured from the satellite. We could able to estimate like a nitrate or the ammonium or the sulfate, all these for using the remote sensing data. So putting this together, we try to estimate how much of the nitrate deposition is influencing the PP, primary production, and how much of it is acidifying the ocean because of the aerosols. You see here the deposition of the atmospheric aerosols, mainly the sulfates and the nitrates and the other acidic compounds. They are actually changing the total alkalinity by almost 0.1 to 0.5 micromole of the alkalinity is being changed. Even the pH is being changed even up to 0.001 due to the deposition of the atmospheric aerosols. That resulting in change in the CO2 levels as well because the decrease of the pH increases the CO2. Using this kind of a new data available, incorporating this into the numerical models can able to understand better on how climate change is going to influence to what rate ocean acidification could take place on the surface in this region. Now, as a part of the different programs, like in the NCCR is also measuring the coastal water pH along with nutrients and other, and INCOIS as a part of the coastal observatory also measuring the ocean pH all along the Indian coast and different regions, and so that the pH simulations by the modeling can be improved in the future. So it has more sophisticated sensors are being installed there. So the sensor can be, the data can go directly into the satellite and transmit it to the ground station, and can be incorporated into the model so that we can able to calibrate the models so that the simulation can be better done. So the status of the ocean acidification in the Indian Ocean, if you see, the rapid ocean acidification is being occurring in the northern Indian Ocean because of the aerosol deposition of the atmospheric pollutants deposition. It has a serious impact on the national economy, as well as causes the serious problem to the health and food security concern with reference to the mainly with the shellfish or the shell-forming organisms in the ocean. It may not be affecting the soft tissue in the open ocean regions, but in the coastal ocean, even they are being affected. And enhanced production of the coastal regions may increase even the, you know that in the northern Indian Ocean, oxygen minimum zones are very serious problems. Even the coastal oceans, the productivity increases due to the ocean acidification may have a serious impact on the oxygen minimum zones to intensify and migration of the living resources to away from that. The ocean acidification may seriously also impact the shell-secreting organisms in the northern Indian Ocean, because the shell-secreting organisms, they can able to remove the organic matter from the surface to the deep, because their size is bigger, their density is higher, they can sink faster, so that the carbon sequestration is actually much more efficient with them. If they are actually dissolving in the shallow depths, the carbon sequestration is much weaker there. And also those organisms which are depending on them as a food, and that food web link also gets disturbed because of less farming of the shell-based organisms. The increased attention and focus on the ocean impacts and development of the mitigation and the adaptive policies or the strategies are required in this region, which are critical and vulnerable for the ecosystem and for the society's needs. So there are a few recommendations I would like to propose. And we need to formulate the strategies that boost the communities and the ecosystem health, so that the organisms can able to better cope up and for the OA impacts, mainly reducing the local acidifying factors coming from the sewages or the effluents or the other pollutants, and what way the ocean acidification is being occurring. We'll try to identify the drivers there, so that we'll try to stop them, so that we can able to minimize the ocean acidification in the coastal waters, which is already at the highest in the along the Indian coast. Establishment of the framework, because the ocean acidification is measured only in the few regions. We do not know entire Indian coast what rates these acidification is being taking place, what are the vulnerable zones with reference to the ocean acidification. So therefore, we need to have the more observation network and capacity development, so that we can able to assess well the acidification that is being occurring along the Indian coast, and develop the strategies to sensitize and the capacity building of the ocean acidification to vulnerable marine resources dependent communities to improve their resilience and adaptations. So I'll stop here and thank you all the listeners for your attention for this talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very insightful lecture. That was really, we knew about that how ocean acidification is working, especially in the Indian Ocean. And definitely your presentation has helped us further better to understand the processes, that is ocean acidification, and its implications for the marine ecosystem, ocean health, and the importance of the sustainable observation, and what we are doing the scientific research with addressing these emerging challenges. And which really we appreciate your time and for the sharing your expertise for this valuable insight today. And this is the very specious occasions for the World Ocean Day. We got, sir, from audience side, we got a couple of questions. If you agree, we can just take a few of questions. So
Sure,
one
I'll
is,
be happy.
yeah, one from the Dr. Bhaskar from NCPOR. He have one query that why do we find the different epsilon versus the CCM relation geographically? Is it species specific?
Actually, the epsilon is a species specific. The rate, actually it is depending on the growth rate of the plankton and also the cell membrane thickness. So that is where the fractionation actually changes there. That is why it is group specific and the species specific, depending on the cell wall size and the thickness.
So, and another question is there is the hydrogen carbonate uptake by the cyanobacteria equal to the diatoms? I say that diatoms are considered the most efficient carbon dioxide sequestration.
Diatoms can also uptake bicarbonate, but they can also take the CO2 directly because of their cell size. The cell wall is permeable for the CO2. If CO2 concentration decreases from the outside, they can able to easily take up, and the energy consuming CCN need not be operated there, so that with less energy, more CO2 can be fixed in that. In case of the low CO2, they can able to take the bicarbonate and they can operate the CCN and can able to fix the carbon dioxide. They can operate both. Where the cyanobacteria cannot able to operate the CO2 diffusion because their cell wall, their cell size does not able to allow CO2 to penetrate inside.
Thank you so much, sir. And one more question is from the Dr. Sharad Tripathi from NCPOR. He would like to know about that which marine regions are expected to be the most susceptible to ocean acidification under the future warming and stratification scenario.
There are the few zones we can see, and the impacts are, the regions are different. For example, you take in the Bay of Bengal, where the discharges are going to be changed because now salinity changing there due to the melting of the Himalayan glaciers or the river discharge increase, where the stratification is increasing, nutrients are becoming poorer and poorer, where ocean acidification is actually going in an opposite direction in certain zones of the Bay of Bengal. Like a western side, ocean acidification is increasing, where the aerosols are increasing. Eastern side, actually basification is taking place because of the river discharge. We come to the equatorial zone, which is more depending on the circulation based. IOD period, you will find more acidification on the western side. Non-IOD period, you will find the acidification more on the eastern side. When you come to the polar region, subpolar regions, where the most of the CO2 is going into the ocean, mainly the mud water regions. That is where high amount of the acidification is anticipated. The model shows that the Southern Ocean CO2 is increasing so much, and it is coming close to the even saturation level. If so, but the more dangerous is the Southern Ocean saturation is the more dangerous one, because the majority of the atmospheric CO2 is going into the ocean and the Southern Ocean. If that is getting saturated, the oceanic uptake will be reduced in the future, so that atmospheric CO2 levels will increase further and the warming further increases. So the sensitive zones are the Southern Ocean, and within the Indian Ocean, if you see the northern basin, due to the different mechanisms.
Thank you so much, sir. I think I'll not take much time. One more, I think recent one question we got it from Athira Nayak. I don't know from where, which they have not written their name. So he has asked that, or is he or she, that nowadays a lot of work is going on carbon capture. How much impact it is having? Is it theoretically possible to bring the carbon dioxide to the safer or baseline level using these techniques?
Yeah. Now the carbon capture is going in a different directions in the different areas. From the land, people are trying actually the developing some kind of a chemicals it can able to absorb the CO2. Geological way is that wherever from the land side the gas, the petroleum or the gas resources, once they remove, they wanted to fill with the CO2 and cap it, so that in the future it may become a fossil fuel. Some people, they try to do it by increasing the productivity in certain zones, like in the subpolar regions where the iron is limiting, where if you add the more iron, the productivity can be increased, and so that the atmospheric CO2 can be absorbed. And the fourth one is that liquefy the CO2 and actually inject that into the deep waters. But many of them, especially in the oceanic regions, they have a side effects on them. For example, you take the liquefying the CO2 into the deep ocean, and you know that deep water will come to the surface at one time, depending on the where you inject. Even if you inject at the North Atlantic, in 600 years it has to come back to the surface. Then it will be a catastrophe. Whatever all the CO2 injected will come to the surface and then go into the atmosphere. So the whatever the sequestration you are doing is a temporary. Whereas iron enrichment is also, people could not able to prove that the carbon produced as an organic matter is reaching all the way to the bottom. Most of the new carbon, that is the new organic matter produced due to the increase of the iron, which is being utilized within the top 1000 meters itself. Top 1000 meters, typical age is actually 10 years. 10 years of the sequestration is not important. It's very short term. Unless that carbon sinks all the way to the bottom. The other one is that is the capping into the geological time scales. We don't know over a period of several hundreds of years what kind of changes do take place in that regions. The fourth one is the carbon capture materials to prepare. How to store them? Where do you store them? What way they will come back to the surface, to the atmosphere? All we need to be seen that. So the people are trying in a several ways, and and also looking for the drawbacks. As of now, the mechanisms what we understand now, I think it may be very impossible to bring back to the level which we have, something like a 280 to 300 levels as of now. What we have in our hand is to reduce the emissions, because the life is so much high in the atmosphere for the carbon dioxide. Even if you release today, it is not so easy to remove it from the atmosphere. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for I think we got a lot of interest with your talk, and many of the questions we are getting nowadays after you started giving answer. One very interesting, I think I would like to personally take from there. Dr. Nuncio, he's working in Arctic, and he had one question that how the Arctic will be transforming in terms of the acidification. Is there any parallel to the Bay of Bengal, considering the amount of fresh water present in both the basins?
You see, the freshwater pH is not uniform everywhere. Like in the Bay of Bengal, for example, you see the Ganges discharges are actually relatively basic. Like 8.3 pH, you will get it. Whereas, if you see the peninsular rivers pH is actually 6.5 to 6.8, they're very acidic. So it's depending on, I don't know what is the Arctic river pH. If their pHs are actually more acidic, and their discharges will lead to the more acidification. Because the aerosol impact is much smaller there in the Arctic compared to the tropical regions, so aerosol impact may not be so much high. But if the Arctic pH is actually more basic, then it is a good news that they can able to absorb more CO2 from the atmosphere. So depending on the source water pH, that actually the impacts the OA in the Arctic region.
Thank you so much. I think sir has another talk. I think I have seen on a website also. Will not take much time. So for this, thank you so much, sir, for as we come for the end of the today's World Ocean Day lecture. And I really, from behalf of NCPOR and Director NCPOR, we express our heartfelt gratitude to you for delivering such engaging and informative lecture. And as my duty to thanks to the committee, I would like to convey my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Thamban Melot sir, Director NCPOR, for his inspiring messages and his continued leadership, and which is going to be a big role for the India's polar and ocean research program. Especially, I extend my thanks to Dr. Rahul Mohan for taking this initiative, especially for the today's talk idea, and extending his support. My grateful acknowledgement to the constant support from the guidance from the Ministry of Earth Sciences, Government of India, for the strengthening the scientific research, observation, and the capacity building in the field of ocean and polar sciences. My sincere thanks goes to all the scientists, researchers, faculty members, students, and the participants who has joined today and contributed to the success of this event on the World Ocean Day. Let's reform our commitment to advancing the scientific knowledge and promoting the conservation of sustainable management of our ocean for the benefits of the future generation. With these remarks, I thank all once again for your participation and support. Have a pleasant day. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you.